Drill is a crazy genre. Unlike other normal rappers, most all drill rappers actually have gang backgrounds and are really about that life. You may not be convinced by their music, but these people are real life savages and are very respected in real life outside the studio. FBG Wooski is one of O Block's main ops and has often been called the gravedigger of Chiraq. Here's all you need to know about the life and career of FBG King Op Wooski. Even though Wooski is a sworn enemy of O Block, the rapper originally lived in the Parkway Gardens houses, the housing project controlled by the Black Disciples. Wooski's brother was a BD named Big Mike, and he helped Wooski early on, even once he started hanging out with the Gangsta Disciples. Growing up, Wooski started rocking with dudes from the STL EBT set of the GDs like FBG Duck and Tuka, and also joined in on their beefs. At first, he avoided any smoke with Wick City, the set that would become O Block because of his brother, Big Mike. But that didn't last long, and Wooski was eventually forced to leave Parkway Gardens and settle in the area around 63rd and St. Lawrence, the territory claimed by STL EBT. Allegedly, Wooski was forced to leave Parkway Gardens after he killed a member of Wick City named Reezy. A huge brawl broke out between Wick City and STL EBT, and Reezy would end up getting shot. Wooski would be blamed for the shooting, even though he was only 12 or 13 at the time, and Reezy was much older. It's not clear whether Wooski was actually the killer or if he just got blamed for the murder because he was one of the youngest. But either way, even Big Mike couldn't protect his brother from retaliation, and he had to leave Parkway Gardens for good. This brawl was one of the first major fights in the war between O Block and STL EBT, which continues to this day. After Wooski left O Block and got tied with FBG, he became one of the BD's main ops. This beef would get even crazier after Wooski allegedly killed another member of O Block named Platoon. Platoon was a good friend of King Von, which would make the two rappers sworn enemies. King Von would even seek revenge on Wooski by going after his cousin Modell. Von caught both Modell and his cousin Miles lacking and shot them both. He caught Modell first, and when Miles went to help his cousin, Von showed no mercy and shot him too. Miles ended up pulling through, but Modell didn't make it. Wooski didn't see Von as much of a threat at first, but after he killed Modell, Von became his main enemy. After that, Von and Wooski started going back and forth on Twitter, dissing each other. Wooski claimed that Von had seen him at the corner store, and Von did nothing. Von responded by saying that he came back looking for him, and Wooski just ran away. They both even started bragging about how many bodies they caught, trying to one-up each other in front of the entire world. They would continue the Twitter beef for the next few years as the war between O Block and STL only got worse. But the beef was put on hold for a while when both rappers ended up catching a case that would keep them off the streets for a while. In 2014, Von was at a house party on LaSalle Street in the Inglewood neighborhood of the South Side. During the party, a dude named Malcolm Stuckey and some guys he was with started mean mugging Von in a way that put him on edge. But because he was by himself, he didn't try anything. Instead, he went and recruited backup from none other than Big Mike, Wooski's older brother. He and Von spotted Stuckey hanging out by the porch and opened fire. Stuckey was killed in the shooting, and several of his friends were wounded trying to get away. Not long after, Von and Big Mike were both arrested and charged with 1 count of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. Pretty cold-blooded to murder someone just for giving you a dirty look. But in the streets of Chicago, anyone mean-mugging a known savage like King Von should expect the smoke. Von and Big Mike will be fighting the case for the next 3.5 years. Meanwhile, Wooski will be catching his own case. In 2015, he got hit with a gun charge and spent the next few years locked up. The case against Von was looking pretty bad after Big Mike agreed to cooperate with police and testify that Von was the one who fired the shot that killed Malcolm Stuckey. But fearing retaliation on either the streets or behind bars after being labeled a snitch, Big Mike refused to take the stand at the last minute. No other witnesses came forward to testify, and the prosecutors didn't have much other evidence to tie Von to the crime. At this point, it had already been several years since the shooting, so Von held his ground and was eventually acquitted of the charges, while Big Mike got sentenced to 28 years. When Von was still locked up fighting this case, Wooski would be back on the streets and release his most popular song to date. The track contains several disses to members of O Block, both alive and dead. A BD from O Block named HK had recently been killed outside Parkway Gardens by a group of GDs. On Computer's remix, Wooski mocked HK's death and took credit for the hit on behalf of the gang, although it's been debated whether or not he was the actual shooter. On the track, he also rapped that he was trying to catch Durk or E-Day, making direct threats at Lil Durk and another BD from 600 named E-Day. So, if Wooski wasn't already O Block's #1 op, he was after releasing this track. The song got pretty popular, racking up millions of views and earning Wooski respect from Chicago drill fans, which only made his enemies hate him even more. But the years of sliding through enemy territory, hunting ops, had taught Wooski how to move smart, and he wasn't going to let his rivals have the satisfaction of catching them lacking. So the BDs came up with a smart plan that almost took out the gravedigger of Chiraq for good. Since they couldn't get to Wooski, they went after the first person they could find who was close to him. That person was rapper and MOB member Dusky the Man. Dusky the Man and Wooski were cool with each other and had even collaborated on the track Shooters. Dusky was a beloved member of MOB, a set of the GDs that's allied with STL EBT and Enemies of 600, O Block, and other BD sets. So his death was a major loss for the gang, and after he was killed, his friends were out for blood. His death led to one of the fastest revenge hits in Chiraq history, and only around 24 hours later, a 600 member named Waldo was killed after dissing Dusky online. So tensions were high between the two gangs, but things would get wild at Dusky the Man's funeral. Because Dusky was well loved, the BDs knew that all of their main ops would be in attendance. So they plotted what has gone down as one of the coldest shootings in the history of the war in Chiraq. On the day before Dusky's funeral, King Von even went as far as FaceTiming Wooski and letting them know that they had a surprise for him.
Listen, we gonna surprise. It's time about tonight.
In the video, they're laughing and making fun of each other. If you didn't know the context, you'd think they were friends who were just playing around. Only in Chicago can two enemies share a laugh while plotting each other's death, but that's the type of relationship that Von and Wooski had. Even though they hated each other's guts, they still respected each other as a worthy opponent. The day of Dusky the Man's funeral was tense. Everyone knew that something could happen at any moment. FBG Duck's cousin Ruga spoke in an interview about the funeral not long after it happened. He said that he had a feeling something was going to go down because there was bad energy in the air.
To be honest, I kind of felt like something, you know what I'm saying, funny was gonna happen on some real.
The BDs must have been sitting outside, waiting for the right moment to attack, because they finally caught their number one op by himself when Wooski stepped outside to have a cigarette. As soon as Wooski stepped outside, 4 men in hoodies rolled up and sprayed the church with bullets. Wooski was shot in the head, and 5 other people who were leaving the building after the service were also hit. Footage from outside the church after the shooting shows how chaotic the scene was, with people spilling out into the street to help victims. Thankfully, no one was killed, even Wooski, who sustained a pretty serious shot to the head. So, Von made good on his promise to surprise Wooski at the funeral. Pretty cold-hearted to spray up a church, just as everyone is leaving after mourning another death. But they probably saw it as their only opportunity to catch Wooski slipping, and in the streets of Chicago, nothing is off limits. But even though Wooski would survive the shooting and live to haunt his ops another day, it would take him off the streets for a while. The injury he sustained was pretty serious, and he would spend the next few months recovering and relearning how to walk. But just because Wooski got hit doesn't mean the beef stopped there. Von would continue dissing his enemy on social media, claiming that the shooting turned him into a He said that after getting hit, Wooski didn't want to diss him on social media anymore, whereas before, they'd be at each other's throats every day.
I ain't gonna lie, he ain't been the same.
But it wouldn't take long for Wooski to be back on the streets. While he was recovering, his homie, FBG Duck, held it down for the crew and continued sending shots at Durk and Von. Although this had been going on long before Wooski was shot. But by 2020, both sides would suffer major losses. First, in August 2020, FBG Duck was gunned down while shopping in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood, a wealthy shopping district about 30 minutes from the south side.
Identified as 26-year-old Carlton Weekly, but more commonly known by the name FBG Duck, the rapper was gunned down on Oak Street Tuesday, just west of Michigan Avenue, by 4 men who police say jumped out of 2 separate vehicles and started shooting.
Duck had just recently dropped a diss track called Dead, where he mentioned several dead members of O Block and other BD sets by name. The ops caught him lacking while out shopping for his girlfriend and shot him in broad daylight. Just like Wooski, they probably knew that Duck would be careful when moving around the south side. But in a nice neighborhood with police and security cameras everywhere, he probably wasn't as cautious, and his enemies were able to get the drop on him. Even though he had a piece, his gun jammed, and he wasn't able to get any shots off in time to save his own life. Then, just a few months later, King Von would be killed in Atlanta after a confrontation with rapper Quando Rondo.
One of them, a rapper Davon Bennett, who goes by the stage name King Von. His social media pages have been filling up with RIP messages and other artists sending their condolences.
Even though the GDs had nothing to do with Von's death, that didn't stop them from dissing. Wooski was back on live not long after Von was killed. When asked by one of his followers who was in his blunt, he responded by saying, "A whole lot of Parkway Gardens," while his girl can be heard in the background saying, "Von." So even if it took him some time to recover, Wooski still hasn't given up his old ways completely. But with Von now dead, Wooski had no one to go back and forth with on social media. So Lil Durk ended up taking on the responsibility of continuing to apply pressure to the ops. Durk has sent shots at both Wooski and Duck on a track off the deluxe version of his 2020 album, The Voice, called Should've Ducked, featuring Pooh Shiesty. On the track, Durk raps, "You come outside with your gun? Lil boy, you dumb as f***. Ain't no quick run to the store. They pop out, fire you up. I told my P.O. through the gate that I get high as f***. She asked me how high I get. I told her high as Duck, Tuka." In this bar, Durk is making a direct reference to FBG Duck, even mentioning him by name and following it up with a Tuka ad-lib to throw more gas on the fire. He continues with the bar, "He survived one in the head, but it f***ed up his body. You think he off an eighth of red, the way that he nodding." In this bar, he's taking an obvious shot at Wooski, making fun of him for getting shot and then having trouble speaking and moving after making a recovery. On the same track, Durk raps, "My brother told me get some property, I keep getting Glockies." This bar will become relevant a few months later after Durk's brother D-Thang will be shot and killed outside a nightclub in Harvey, Illinois.
The brother of local rapper Lil Durk is dead after shooting at a club in Harvey this weekend.
D-Thang was Durk's older brother and had tried to get the rapper into buying real estate and other businesses so that he wouldn't have to rely on drill rap to pay his bills. Even though Durk listened to his advice, he still kept up with all the and dissing, which is what many believe got his brother killed. There's no evidence to suggest that Wooski had anything to do with D-Thang's death or if it was even gang related. But it wouldn't be a crazy possibility that it was a group of GDs looking to get revenge for all the disses and bodies dropped. At this point, Wooski is a certified street legend, having survived the war in Chiraq that claimed the lives of many of his friends even after being shot in the head. Hopefully, he'll take the blessing he's been given and leave the streets alone for good. But if he's still in Chicago and willing to continue to diss his enemies online, there's a good chance he'll get sucked back into the cycle of violence.